Dean Martin was halfway through a song when he noticed the gun. Not aimed at him, not yet. Just resting on the table in front of a man in the front row. A man whose name was whispered in Las Vegas and never spoken aloud. Dean stopped singing while the band played on, and the audience held its breath. Then he did something that would either make him a legend or get him killed. He walked straight to the mobster and handed him the microphone. To understand that moment, you have to understand Las Vegas in 1965. It wasn't the family-friendly tourist destination it would later become. It was a city owned and operated by organized crime. Casinos, hotels, and shows all ran through the mob, and everyone knew it. The Sands Hotel, where Dean performed regularly, was partially owned by crime families, and Frank Sinatra had his own complicated ties to them. Peter Lawford and Joey Bishop knew the rules. Perform, entertain, keep your mouth shut, and never cross the men who really ran the town. Dean Martin understood this better than most. He grew up in Steubenville, Ohio, where organized crime was part of everyday life, and his father worked in a barber shop that doubled as a front for illegal gambling. Dean knew these men. He understood how these men thought, what they were capable of, and that in Las Vegas, survival depended on knowing your place. But Dean Martin had something most people didn't: a complete lack of fear when it came to performing. On stage, he was untouchable, not out of arrogance, but because he genuinely didn't care about impressing anyone. He was there to sing, tell jokes, and enjoy himself, and if the audience didn't like it, that was their problem. That attitude had carried him through his career. But on June 18, 1965, it would be tested in ways no one could have anticipated. The trouble had begun 3 days earlier, when Dean was in his dressing room at the Sands, preparing for his evening show, and a knock sounded at the door. His assistant, a young man named Jackie Romano, opened it to find a sharply dressed man standing in the hallway. Jackie recognized him instantly and went pale. Without waiting to be invited in, the man said, "Mr. Martin, Mr." Dean glanced up from the magazine in his hands and replied calmly, "Tell Mr. Antonelli I'm pretty tired after shows these days." The man's expression didn't change. "Mr." Dean set the magazine down, stood, and walked to the doorway, meeting the man's eyes. "Tell Mr. Antonelli that Dean Martin doesn't take meetings with people who send messengers," he said. The man studied Dean for a long moment before nodding slowly. After he left, Jackie was visibly shaking. "Dean, do you know who that was? That was Vincent Antonelli's guy." Dean only shrugged and returned to his magazine. "I can, and I did. I don't work for the mob, Jackie." Jackie tried to explain that Antonelli wasn't just connected to organized crime. He was one of the most feared enforcers in the Nevada crime family, a man with a reputation for violence so extreme that even other mobsters avoided him. He'd been linked to at least a dozen murders, though nothing was ever proven. And when Vincent Antonelli wanted to meet you, you met with him. No exceptions. Dean wasn't interested. He'd dealt with tough guys his entire life and learned early that showing fear meant you were finished. So he simply went about his business. The next night, June 16th, Dean performed his usual show, and afterward the same messenger appeared at his dressing room door. "Mr. Antonelli is waiting downstairs." Dean was loosening his bow tie. "Tell Mr." The man frowned. "But Mr." Dean smiled. "Am I?" The messenger's jaw tightened. "Mr." "No, pal." Dean cut in. "I understand perfectly. I understand that I'm tired, and I understand that I'm going to my room to have a drink and go to sleep," Dean said calmly. "Now, you can stand there and argue with me, or you can deliver my message to your boss." The messenger left without another word, but Jackie was beside himself. "Dean, you're going to get yourself killed. You have to talk to Frank. He knows these guys." Dean refused. "I'm not getting Frank involved, and I'm not meeting with some thug who thinks he can snap his fingers and I'll come running. I'm Dean Martin." On June 17th, the day before the incident, word began spreading through the Sands that Vincent Antonelli was angry. Very angry. Casino staff with mob connections quietly warned Dean's people that he needed to make peace with Antonelli. but Dean still refused. That evening, his manager, Herman Citron, came to his dressing room, pleading with him. "Dean, I'm begging you. Just take the meeting," Dean asked. Herman hesitated. "I'm not sure, but I've heard it has something to do with his girlfriend. She's a dancer at the Tropicana, and apparently she's been talking about leaving Vegas for Hollywood." Dean laughed. "I've never even met the girl. It doesn't matter if it's true," Herman said desperately. "Vincent believes it, and that's all that matters. Just meet with him. Apologize." But Dean remained unmoved. Herman left the dressing room shaking his head, knowing Dean well enough to understand that once his mind was made up, there was no changing it, and also knowing just how dangerous the situation had become. June 18th, 1968 was the day everything came to a head. Show, and the atmosphere in the hotel was thick with tension. Staff whispered in corners. Security was unusually alert, and everyone sensed something was coming, though no one would say what. Jackie rushed into Dean's dressing room, pale and terrified. Dean asked. Vincent Antonielli bought out the first 3 rows, him and about 20 of his guys. Dean didn't even look up from adjusting his bow tie in the mirror. "So they paid for tickets, didn't they?" Jackie pleaded. "Dean, this isn't a joke. They're not here to hear you sing." Dean Martin stepped onto the stage of the Copa Room at the Sands Hotel, facing a packed house of 2,800 people. The atmosphere was electric, but not in the usual way. There was tension in the air, a sense that something was off. Dean scanned the audience and spotted them immediately. The first 3 rows filled with men in dark suits. And there, in the center of the front row, sat Vincent Antonielli. He was a large man, close to 250 pounds, with a face that looked like it had survived 100 fights. His eyes were cold, calculating, and locked directly on Dean Martin. Dean smiled and addressed the room. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Sands. We've got a great show for you tonight." Dean sang with his usual relaxed grace, moving easily across the stage, though his gaze kept drifting back to Antonielli. The mobster didn't clap or smile. He just sat there, staring. When the song ended, the room erupted in applause, except for the first 3 rows, which remained silent. Thank you," Dean said into the microphone. "Don't worry, I won't take it personally," Dean said with a grin. A few nervous laughs rippled through the audience, but the men in the front rows didn't react. Vincent Antonielli's expression remained cold and unreadable. Dean launched into his next song, "Memories Are Made of This," and about halfway through, he noticed Antonielli reach into his jacket. Dean's voice faltered for a split second, but the mobster wasn't pulling a gun. He produced a cigarette, lighting it slowly and deliberately, never taking his eyes off Dean. Then Antonielli did something that made the room collectively tense. He drew his finger across his throat in a clear, unmistakable gesture. Dean saw it. The band saw it. Nearby tables saw it. And a murmur ran through the crowd. Dean stopped singing, though the band played a few more bars before trailing off into silence. Standing at center stage, Dean faced Antonielli directly, while 2,800 people held their breath. Then Dean did the unexpected. He smiled. "Folks, we're going to take a little break from the planned program here. See, there's a gentleman in the front row who seems to have something he wants to express." He stepped to the edge of the stage. The audience tensed, and Antonielli sat perfectly still, eyes narrowing. Dean looked down at him and said, "Sir, I notice you've been sitting there, making gestures at me all night." The room went utterly silent. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. He knelt at the edge of the stage, extending the microphone toward Vincent Antonielli. "Why don't you come up and sing? You seem like you might have a nice voice." Antonielli stared at him for a long moment, his face unreadable. But anyone who knew him understood that this was the most dangerous moment, the moment he decided whether to kill you or not. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating, as the entire room waited. Then, unbelievably, Antonielli started to laugh. Not a friendly laugh, but a cold, calculating one. He looked at Dean Martin kneeling there, fearless and slightly amused, and laughed. "You got balls, Martin," Antonelli said, his voice cutting through the quiet room. Dean smiled. "Is that a yes on the singing?" Antonelli shook his head, still smiling that cold smile. "Nah, you keep singing, Dean." Dean stood back up. "You sure? Anytime you want to come up here and take over, you just let me know," Dean said. "I'm sure," Antonelli replied, then added almost as an afterthought, "Keep doing your thing, Dean." Dean nodded and returned to center stage, picking up the microphone stand. "Well, folks," he said to the audience, "looks like I'm going to have to finish this show myself after all. But before we continue, let's have a round of applause for my friend in the front row." The audience, still uncertain about what had just happened, clapped nervously. Antonelli raised his glass in a mock toast. Dean dove back into his performance, singing and joking for the next hour, as if nothing had occurred. Antonelli and his men remained for the entire show, standing and applauding alongside everyone else when it ended. Later, in his dressing room, Dean was interrupted by a knock at the door. Jackie opened it to find Antonelli standing there alone. He asked. Dean nodded. "Sure," Dean asked as Antonelli walked in and closed the door behind him. Dean poured 2 glasses and handed one to the mobster. They stood in silence for a moment before Antonelli spoke. "You know why I wanted to meet with you?" "I heard," Dean replied. Antonelli nodded. "My girl. She's been talking about leaving Vegas, going to Hollywood to be an actress." "I don't even know who your girl is," Dean said. "I know that now," Antonelli admitted. "Turns out she was talking about someone else. A casting agent had already handled it." Dean didn't ask what that meant. He didn't want to know. Antonelli sipped his scotch. "The thing is, I sent my guy to talk to you 3 times. You blew him off every time, made me look bad in front of my people." "So, you came to my show to do what?" Dean asked. Antonelli smiled. Dean said. "No, you don't," Antonelli replied, finishing his drink. "Here's the thing, Martin. I respect what you did tonight. Most guys would have pissed themselves if I did that throat-cutting thing. But you walked right up to me and handed me a microphone. Or stupidity," Dean said with a slight smile. "Maybe both," Antonelli shrugged, extending his hand. "We're good, Dean." Dean shook his hand. Antonelli headed for the door, then paused. "Deal," Dean said. And just like that, it was over. Vincent Antonelli left, and Dean Martin had survived what could have been the most dangerous night of his life. But the story didn't end there. Word of what happened at the Sands spread through Las Vegas like wildfire, and by the next morning, everyone in the entertainment business knew. Dean Martin had stood up to Vincent Antonelli, survived, and earned the mobster's respect. The incident fundamentally changed how the mob viewed entertainers in Las Vegas. Before that night, performers were considered expendable employees, but Dean had proven that a performer with enough courage and charisma could command respect, even from the most dangerous men in the city. The next day, Frank Sinatra called Dean after hearing what had happened. Frank demanded, "Why did you do it, Dean?" Dean paused, thinking, "Because if I'd run the first time he snapped his fingers, I'd have been running for the rest of my life. These guys respect strength, Frank. You know that. Show weakness, and they own you." Frank was silent for a long moment, then laughed. "You crazy bastard. You're either the bravest guy I know, or the dumbest." "Maybe both," Dean said, echoing what he had told Antonelli that night. Over the years, the story of that night at the Sands grew into legend, with different people adding their own embellishments. Some claimed Dean had pulled a gun, others that Antonelli had actually come on stage to fight him. None of those stories were true, yet they reflected how the incident had captured people's imaginations. The truth was simpler, but in some ways even more impressive. Dean Martin had faced down a killer armed only with his courage and his charisma. Dean Martin's refusal to be intimidated that night had cemented his place as one of the true legends of Las Vegas. Afterward, he and Vincent Antonelli kept a respectful distance, occasionally crossing paths at restaurants or casinos, and exchanging nothing more than a nod of acknowledgement. Antonelli even attended a few more of Dean's shows over the years, always in the front row, always applauding enthusiastically. In 1973, Antonelli was shot and killed outside a Las Vegas restaurant in what was clearly a mob hit, the result of some internal power struggle that Dean neither knew about nor wanted to. In his own way, Antonelli had been a man of honor. Years later, when Dean was asked about that night in June 1965, he downplayed it, saying, "People make too much of it. I just didn't want some guy in the front row ruining my show, so I addressed it." But anyone who had been there knew better. Those who witnessed it saw something rare, a moment when courage and composure in the face of genuine danger transformed what could have been a deadly situation into something entirely different. A moment of mutual respect between two men from completely different worlds. Dean Martin had built his career on appearing effortlessly cool and unflappable, but that night at the Sands, it wasn't an act. He truly was that calm, that steady, and that brave. The microphone he offered to Vincent Antonelli became a symbol of something larger, a quiet declaration that said, "You want to be in charge? Fine." And Antonelli, one of Las Vegas's most dangerous men, recognized that courage and respected it. That night had no gunfight, no dramatic escape, just one man refusing to be intimidated and another acknowledging that refusal. That's what made Dean Martin a legend, not only his talent and charisma, but his unwavering refusal to bow to anyone, no matter how powerful or dangerous. Dean Martin was the king of cool, and on June 18, 1975, he proved it beyond question.